We're back with Irwin Stovroff and Cash right here. And Irwin, I'd like us to continue where we left off. What you're doing is so very much needed and very commendable. I'd like to take you back, way back, to World War II and ask you to share with our viewers how your story actually began as far as military involvement is concerned.
When the war broke out, I was just getting ready to go to college, and instead of going to college, I decided to volunteer, become part of the Army Air Force. At that time was the Air Force. And fortunately, I was accepted and did some training in Fort Niagara, and then went down into Arkansas for basic training, and after that into the state of Texas, where I stayed for basically all my basic training. We all started off hoping we'd be pilots, but what you became was determined by what the needs were. And my class was advised that if we wanted to be an officer in the Air Force, that they needed bombardiers and navigators who unfortunately were losing them in combat. So I decided to become a bombardier. And after well over a year's training, I was sent overseas. I went to England. I became part of the 8th Air Force, the 44th Bomb Group, and the 506th Squadron. At that time, when we started flying, the casualty rate was somewhere about 71%. And that was before we really and truly got fighter planes to escort us to our targets. By the time we were almost completed with our tour, we were down to about 60% casualty rating. I had flew 35 combat missions, which was exactly the maximum that you were required to fly. And on my 35th mission over the coast of France, and trying to blow up bridges so the Germans could not get away from the front when the invasion was coming in. I was shot down and bailed out, and I bailed right out into the German forces, right in the front lines. I was captured immediately and became a prisoner of war.
What a dramatic and horrific experience that must have been, being shot down over Nazi German lines and being taken prisoner. Tell us what occurred following that.
After I was shot down and captured, one of the most toughest times of my life occurred, in which I didn't think I was going to get through it, and that was the fact that after they captured me and they captured our crew, we were paraded into a graveyard in the front lines. And in the graveyard were bodies lying in the ground. And when I saw that, I thought to myself, I'm next. And then the German officer said, 9-9, we do not kill our prisoners. So that was a relief. And then because there was so much action in the front lines, everything was being shot up, there was so much going on, there was no way they could move us. So we were put into a farmyard near Caen, C-A-E-N, Caen, in the Normandy area. We were there for about 3 or 4 days. My co-pilot, Bill Minier, and I decided to escape. And we did get away, and within 15 or 20 minutes, we were again surrounded, and we were advised if we tried to escape again, we would be shot. We were kept in the farmyard for, I would say, somewhere around about a week. And after that, we were put in trucks and taken into Paris. And it was not the way I had hoped to ever enter into Paris. At that time, of course, it was occupied.
I'd say.
And stayed in Paris for a few days, and then we were transported again by truck to Frankfurt, Germany, and then to an area called a Dulag Luft, which was in Wetzlar in Germany. It's outside of Frankfurt. And the Germans were totally convinced that every American officer, particularly in the Air Force, knew what was going on, knew all the programs that were being planned, and of course we did not. What we knew was that we got up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we were given breakfast. We had a briefing. We were shown where we were going to go that day. We got into our planes and we took off, and that's when we knew what we were doing. But the Germans were totally convinced that we knew everything. And here is a very interesting story. I was sent to the Stalag Luft, and you were put in solitary. And then you hear a lot of noises, a lot of things that are psyching you. And then I was taken into a private room, and this German Nazi officer spoke to me in absolute perfect English. And he wanted to know everything that I could tell him, and I told him my name, rank, and serial number, and that's all I could tell him because I knew nothing else. Well, of course, he was not convinced. And the second time, we went through the same routine. And again, I gave him my name, rank, and serial number, as I was told to do. And after the third one, the fourth time I went into his office, he said to me, "Lieutenant," he said, "I know who you are, and I know what you are." When he said what you are, I knew he knew I was Jewish. And he said to me, "Lieutenant, let me tell you who you are." And he made my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, my grandmother, my public school, the public school I went to, the high school I went to. He named the job that I had when I was ushering in a theater. And he named a girl by the name of Geraldine Chertoff that I had been taking out.
Well, an absolutely terrifying experience. How on earth could they back then, without the internet, learn so much about you?
That was the most amazing thing that had happened. After he told me that he knew what I was and went through and knew my entire early part of my life, I said, "I just don't understand." The officer said to me, "Lieutenant, let me tell you something. I know everything about you, and the reason is because you lived on Claremont Avenue in Buffalo, New York, and my parents lived on Ashland Avenue in Buffalo, New York, which was the next street over." And he said, "And you were their newspaper boy." And that actually happened. It's been written up in several books. And it was just a shocker to me to find out that he had left America, and evidently with the belief that the Germans were going to win the war.
Incredible. So what happened next?
Well, after that, within 3 days, I was put in a boxcar, the boxcars that you've seen so often when you think about the Holocaust and what they did. The very same boxcars they put us in, jammed us into these boxcars, locked the doors. There was no way we could get out. And we started on our road to Stalag Luft I in Germany. And what the Germans did to break every rule was they did not mark on the top of the railroad cars we were POWs. And also at night, they left us in the marshalling yards. And the marshalling yards is where the British were bombing every night, trying to destroy their transportation facilities. Fortunately, they didn't show up, and fortunately, I got all the way into Barth, Germany, which is right on the Polish border on the Baltic Sea, and it's called Stalag Luft I. And that's where I remained until the end of the war, when fortunately I was liberated by the Russians. Actually, the Cossacks came in themselves on horseback with their swords drawn and everything, and it was just a wild scene. And but we were liberated, and finally relief came when arrangements were made. Within a specific number of hours, the Air Force flew in B-17s and B-24s stripped down so that we could jump in the plane and fly back to freedom.
What you've seen in your lifetime is just incredible, and it is so sad that such terrible wars occur back then and of course today also. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing presently and why you're doing it.
Well, when I told you of what I'm doing now, it's very obvious. The reason is, and it's a why I'm doing it is because I'm a lucky man. I flew a lot of missions. I got shot down. I was a prisoner of war. I went through a lot of stories there that were not pleasant, and yet I came back home. The government was there, greeted me in a different way than certainly some of the other forces. I was given an opportunity to go to college. I went to college. I graduated, met a lovely lady, raised a family, was successful in my business, and when I retired at the age of 75, I decided that it was payback time, that I've been a pretty lucky guy, and I went through all that combat and all that war, and here I am at this stage, and I'm able to help those that maybe can't help themselves. So I became a National Service Officer for American ex-POWs. And fortunately, at the Palm Beach Hospital, they really and truly encouraged us, and I had a partner, and between the two of us, we did actually complete over 400 claims, getting basically 100% for every ex-POW. And it was there that in 2006, I was called into a director's meeting at the hospital and was informed that they needed somebody to do some special work with the blind rehab program. And the work was to get started in raising money so that these veterans who were receiving rehab complete were not being able to get a dog because, unfortunately, at that time, our government had no budget or no funds or no appropriations for a dog for a veteran coming back, blind, disabled, PTSD, TBI, having seizures, anything you can think of. And the necessity was there. And so I decided that if they asked me to do this, that I would do it. And to this date, we have placed over 60 dogs with these disabled veterans and raised almost $3 million. It is a great satisfactory feeling that I have that I was able to put an organization together. And there are many people that have helped me as we reach this goal, and will continue to reach this goal as long as the need is there for what we call returning heroes. And let me conclude by telling you something, and I lived through it. Freedom isn't free, and somebody has to pay a price for it. So please help us.
Irwin, what you're doing is so very important. I very much commend it. And
thank you.
I'd like to have you on the show again one of these days.
Oh, it'll be my pleasure, and thank you very much for having me.
This concludes our special show for today. I'm Richard Peritz. Thank you for being with us.